My daughter celebrated my disappearance and threw the party of her life. Everyone toasting my placement in care while I sat invisible in the back. What they didn't know was that some people are much harder to erase than they think. Let me tell you exactly what happened 3 months before I walked into that courtroom and watched their champagne glasses shatter. My name is Dorothy Sullivan. I'm 62 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had a loving daughter who cared about my well-being after my husband Robert passed away. I was wrong about a lot of things back then. The confusion started small. Mail that didn't arrive when it should have. Phone calls about appointments I didn't remember making. Bank statements showing transactions that seemed unfamiliar. "Don't worry about the complicated stuff, Mom," Melanie would say, her lawyer voice gentle but firm. "I'll handle the paperwork. You just focus on taking care of yourself." And I was grateful. God, I was so grateful to have a daughter who understood that legal documents made my head spin, that financial planning felt overwhelming without Robert there to explain everything twice. I'd been Robert's wife for 34 years. He handled the investments, the insurance policies, the estate planning. I handled the house, the social calendar, the family relationships. It worked for us. When he died of that sudden heart attack, I felt like I was drowning in paperwork I couldn't understand. "The insurance company needs these forms signed immediately," Melanie explained, spreading documents across my kitchen table. "The bank requires updated account information. The investment firm wants to discuss your portfolio." My hands would shake when I picked up the pen. All those numbers, all that legal language. Thank God for Melanie's law degree. "Just sign here, Mom, and here. This one's important. It gives me temporary authority to handle things while you're adjusting." Adjusting. Such a kind word for the fog I'd been living in since Robert died. The neighbors had started looking at me differently, too. Mrs. Patterson from next door would speak slowly, as if I might not understand regular conversation. The postal worker began handing mail directly to Melanie when she visited, explaining that some seniors have trouble keeping track of important documents. "We're concerned about you living alone in such a big house," Dr. Patricia Hayes said during what I thought was a routine checkup. "Have you considered your long-term care options?" Long-term care. Another phrase that made my stomach clench. "I'm fine in my own home," I said. "I've lived here for 28 years. "Of course," Dr. Hayes smiled, "but it's wise to plan ahead. Your daughter mentioned some episodes of confusion, forgetting conversations, asking the same questions repeatedly. Had I been doing that? The days since Robert's death felt blurred together but confused. I just felt sad. "Maybe we should do some cognitive testing," she continued, "just to establish a baseline for your records." Cognitive testing, baseline. These words felt important, but I couldn't grasp why they made me nervous. "Melanie thinks it's a good idea," Dr. Hayes added. "She's very concerned about your welfare." 3 weeks later, the wedding invitation arrived. Actually, it didn't arrive. Melanie brought it with her during one of her increasingly frequent visits. "Tyler and I decided on a small ceremony," she explained, not quite meeting my eyes. "Very intimate, just immediate family and close friends." I studied the elegant cardstock. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. When should I plan to arrive for photos?" "Oh, Mom." Melanie's voice carried that patient tone she'd been using more often. "We thought, given everything you've been dealing with, it might be better if you just came for the ceremony itself. Less overwhelming." Overwhelming. Another word that seemed to follow me everywhere lately. "Of course," I said, "whatever makes your day perfect." But something cold settled in my chest. In all the wedding planning conversations we'd had over the past 8 months, I'd never been told I was overwhelming. I'd offered to help with flowers, with catering coordination, with guest list management. All declined with gentle explanations about keeping things simple. "The wedding's at a private estate," Melanie continued. "Very exclusive. They have specific protocols about arrival times and, Well, they need to approve all attendees in advance. Approve all attendees, including the mother of the bride, apparently. Will there be dancing? I asked. I've been looking forward to our mother-daughter dance. Melanie's face flickered with something I couldn't identify. We're not doing traditional reception events, Mom. More of a celebration dinner. Elegant, but quiet. No mother-daughter dance. No photos together getting ready. No involvement in planning the most important day of my daughter's life. That sounds lovely, I lied. As Melanie left that afternoon, I noticed her glancing around the house with an expression I'd never seen before. Calculating. As if she were taking inventory. The wedding was 3 weeks away, and I had the strangest feeling I was forgetting something important. Something Robert would have remembered. Something a good mother should know about her daughter's wedding. But every time I tried to focus on what was bothering me, the thought slipped away like water through my fingers. Maybe the neighbors were right. Maybe I was having more trouble than I wanted to admit. I made myself a cup of tea and sat in Robert's chair, looking at the wedding invitation. Such beautiful paper, such careful calligraphy. My name wasn't mentioned anywhere on it. Before we continue, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if stories like this matter to you. What Dorothy discovered at that wedding would change everything she thought she knew about family. The morning of Melanie's wedding, I woke up with clarity I hadn't felt in months. I put on my best dress, the navy blue one Robert always said brought out my eyes, and drove to the address on the invitation. The estate was magnificent. Rolling lawns, white tents, flowers everywhere. Exactly the kind of venue Melanie had dreamed about since she was 12. But when I walked through the entrance, something was wrong. There was no guest book with my name on the bride's family list. The ushers looked confused when I introduced myself as the mother of the bride. One actually asked to see my invitation, as if I might be crashing the wedding. I think there's been some mix-up, he said kindly. But please, find a seat anywhere that's comfortable. A mix-up. At my own daughter's wedding. I found a chair in the back, behind a group of Tyler's relatives I'd never met. The ceremony was beautiful. Melanie looked radiant. Tyler looked genuinely happy. And not once during the entire service did anyone acknowledge that the mother of the bride was present. The reception started immediately after. Champagne, laughter, congratulations flowing everywhere. I waited for someone to notice me, to include me in the family photos, to introduce me to guests who didn't know Robert had passed. Instead, I watched my daughter work the crowd like the skilled attorney she was, accepting congratulations and best wishes from friends and colleagues and extended family members who hugged her and celebrated her new beginning. Then the toasts began. Tyler's father spoke about welcoming Melanie into their family. The maid of honor shared stories about college adventures and career achievements. Tyler himself gave a beautiful speech about finding his perfect partner. Finally, Melanie stood to address her wedding guests. She looked radiant, confident, holding her champagne glass like she was presenting evidence to a jury. I have to thank everyone who made this day possible, she began. Tyler's parents who welcomed me with open arms. My incredible friends who planned the most amazing bachelorette weekend. My colleagues who covered for me while I was planning this perfect celebration. She paused, scanning the crowd with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. And I especially want to thank everyone who understood that today needed to be about just Tyler and me. About starting our new life without any... Another pause. Unnecessary complications. The guests laughed, raising their glasses in agreement. Honestly, Melanie continued, her voice carrying clearly across the tent. Thank God she finally disappeared. Now we can really celebrate. The applause was thunderous. I sat frozen in my chair, champagne untouched, watching my daughter's wedding guests toast my disappearance. Disappeared. Not absent. Not unable to attend. Disappeared. As if I had never existed at all. I left the wedding reception quietly, the way I'd arrived. No one noticed me go. At home, I poured myself 3 fingers of Robert's best whiskey and tried to understand what I'd witnessed. My daughter hadn't just excluded me from her wedding. She'd celebrated my disappearance. The word echoed in my mind. Disappeared. Not absent, not busy, not unable to attend. Disappeared. Like I had never existed. The next morning brought a phone call that made everything worse. Mrs. Sullivan? This is Janet Morrison from Adult Protective Services. We received a call about your welfare. My blood turned to ice. I'm sorry, what? Your daughter contacted us yesterday. She's concerned that you may be having trouble managing your daily activities. She mentioned some confusion about recent events. Confusion about recent events, like forgetting I'd been invited to my daughter's wedding. I'm fine, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. There's been some misunderstanding. I'm sure there has been, ma'am, but we're required to follow up on all reports. Would it be possible for me to visit later this week? Just a brief welfare check. After I hung up, I sat staring at the phone. Adult Protective Services, because my daughter was concerned about my welfare. The same daughter who had toasted my disappearance 12 hours earlier. I walked to my mailbox, something I'd been letting Melanie handle for the past month. The stack of accumulated mail was thicker than I'd expected. Bills, bank statements, insurance correspondence, legal documents. Most of it addressed to someone I didn't recognize. Dorothy Sullivan, CEO, Sunset Manor Care Facility. My hands trembled as I opened the first envelope. A bank statement showing my checking account had been closed. Funds transferred to Facility Care Management Services. The second envelope made my knees weak. A letter from Social Security explaining that my benefits were being redirected to Sunset Manor for my monthly care expenses. The third envelope contained a document that made the room spin around me. A court filing dated 3 weeks ago. A petition for emergency guardianship of Dorothy Sullivan, deemed incompetent to manage her own affairs due to progressive dementia and unsafe living conditions. The petition had been approved. I had a court-appointed guardian I'd never met. My house, my bank accounts, my Social Security, my Medicare. Everything had been transferred to the legal care of Guardian Services Incorporated. According to these documents, I had been declared legally incompetent and placed in a residential care facility for my own safety. But I was sitting in my own kitchen, in my own house, holding the evidence of my legal erasure. I called Sunset Manor with shaking fingers. Sunset Manor, how may I help you? This is Dorothy Sullivan. I understand I'm supposed to be a resident there? A pause. Can you spell that last name for me? I spelled it carefully. I'm sorry, ma'am. We don't have anyone by that name in our facility. Are you sure? My legal guardian apparently arranged for my placement. Another pause, longer this time. Ma'am, can you hold, please? When she returned, her voice sounded different. Careful. Ma'am, our records show Dorothy Sullivan as a registered resident, but there seems to be some confusion about your current status. Can I ask who you're calling for? I'm calling for myself. I'm Dorothy Sullivan. Silence. Ma'am, our Dorothy Sullivan passed away 2 weeks ago. The phone slipped from my hand. According to Sunset Manor, I was dead. According to the court system, I was incompetent and institutionalized. According to my daughter's wedding toast, I had disappeared. But I was sitting in my kitchen, very much alive, holding legal documents that proved I no longer existed. I called the phone number listed for Guardian Services Incorporated. Guardian Services, Rebecca speaking. This is Dorothy Sullivan. I understand you've been appointed as my legal guardian. Oh, Mrs. Sullivan, we've been trying to reach you. There was a mix-up with your placement at Sunset Manor. We have you scheduled for transfer to Willowbrook Gardens tomorrow afternoon. Transfer? I'm in my own home. Yes, that's the problem. You left the facility without authorization. Security has been looking for you for 2 weeks. Your daughter is very worried. My daughter who had celebrated my disappearance. I was never at any facility. Ma'am, I understand this is confusing, but according to our records, you were placed in care following your competency evaluation with Dr. Hayes. The family felt it was the safest option given your episodes. Episodes. There was that word again. What episodes? The wandering, the memory confusion, the inability to manage financial affairs. Your daughter documented everything very thoroughly. She's been taking care of your estate while you've been receiving treatment. Taking care of my estate. While I was supposedly dead, according to the facility that was supposedly caring for me. I need to speak with someone in charge. I'm afraid Mr. Williams is in court today, but I can schedule you an appointment. In the meantime, we really do need to get you back to an approved facility. Your daughter specifically requested that we prioritize your safety. I hung up and immediately called Dr. Patricia Hayes. Dr. Hayes's office, this is Linda. This is Dorothy Sullivan. I need to speak with Dr. Hayes about my competency evaluation. Oh, Mrs. Sullivan, Dr. Hayes has been trying to reach you. Your family is very concerned about your whereabouts. What competency evaluation? When did I have a competency evaluation? According to our records, you were evaluated 3 weeks ago. The results indicated significant cognitive decline, requiring immediate supervised care. I was never evaluated 3 weeks ago. A pause. Ma'am, I have your signature right here on the consent forms, and your daughter was present during the evaluation to provide collateral information. My signature on forms I'd never signed, my daughter providing information during an evaluation I'd never attended. I need copies of everything. I'll need to verify your identity first. Can you confirm your social security number and current address? I gave her both. Another pause, longer this time. Ma'am, our records show your current address as Sunset Manor. Are you calling from the facility? I'm calling from my own home, the home I've lived in for 28 years. I'm going to need to call you back. She never did. Instead, 20 minutes later, there was a knock at my door. 2 people in professional clothing, a man and a woman, both carrying clipboards and official-looking badges. Mrs. Sullivan, I'm David Chen with Guardian Services. This is Nancy Rodriguez from Willowbrook Gardens. We're here to help you get back to your care facility. I don't have a care facility. I live here. Ma'am, I understand this is confusing, Nancy said gently. But you've been missing for 2 weeks. Your family has been beside themselves with worry. We need to get you somewhere safe. Safe from what? David consulted his clipboard. The court order indicates episodes of wandering, confusion about familiar surroundings, inability to recognize family members during visits. What visits? What family members? Your daughter has been visiting regularly. She documented several concerning incidents where you didn't recognize her or remember previous conversations. Melanie had been visiting me regularly, but I lived alone, and the only time I'd seen my daughter in the past month was when she brought the wedding invitation. Unless she'd been visiting me somewhere else. Somewhere I was supposed to be living, but wasn't. Show me the court order, I said. David handed me a thick folder, page after page of legal documentation, medical evaluations I'd never received, family statements about my declining condition, doctor's recommendations for immediate residential care, all signed, all dated, all completely fabricated, but legally binding. Ma'am, Nancy said softly, your daughter just wants what's best for you. Willowbrook Gardens is a beautiful facility. You'll have your own room, regular meals, nursing care available 24 hours a day. And if I refuse? David's expression grew uncomfortable. The court order allows us to transport you for your own safety, but we're hoping you'll come voluntarily. I looked at these 2 people standing in my doorway with legal authority to kidnap me, legally, for my own protection, based on medical evaluations I'd never had, and family statements about visits that never happened. Can I pack a few things? Of course. Take your time. As they waited in the living room, I went upstairs and opened Robert's old desk. In the bottom drawer, underneath insurance papers and tax documents, I found what I was looking for. Robert's address book, full of names and phone numbers I hadn't thought about in months, professional contacts from his consulting business, people who specialized in solving problems that seemed impossible. I dialed the first number. Matthews Investigations. This is Ray. Ray, this is Dorothy Sullivan, Robert's widow. I need help. Dorothy, I'm sorry for your loss. Robert was a good man. What can I do for you? Someone's trying to erase me from existence, and they have legal authority to do it. If you're watching this and thinking about an elderly family member who suddenly became confused or was placed in care without your input, pay attention to what Dorothy found next. Drop a comment if any of this sounds familiar. Your experience might help someone else recognize the warning signs. Ray listened as I quickly explained everything. The wedding toast, the legal documents, the facility that said I was dead, the court order that said I was incompetent. Dorothy, he said finally, how many other families do you think might be going through this same thing? What do you mean? You said Sunset Manor told you that Dorothy Sullivan had died 2 weeks ago, but you're very much alive, which means either they're lying or there's another Dorothy Sullivan who actually did die there. My throat constricted. You think there are other people? I think what you're describing is systematic. The kind of operation that doesn't work with just one victim. How long would it take you to call Sunset Manor back and ask about their other recent deaths? With David and Nancy waiting downstairs to take me to Willowbrook Gardens, I dialed Sunset Manor again. This is Dorothy Sullivan again. I called earlier about the confusion with my records. Oh yes, Mrs. Sullivan, we've been reviewing your file. The person I spoke with mentioned that Dorothy Sullivan had passed away. Can you tell me when that happened? 2 weeks ago. Very peaceful. Her family made beautiful arrangements. Her family was there? Oh yes. Her daughter handled everything. Such a devoted child, visiting right up until the end. My vision tunneled. Can you tell me about your other residents who've passed away recently? I'm not sure that's appropriate to discuss. Please. I think there might be some connection to my situation. A long pause. Well, we did lose 3 residents last month. Eleanor Martinez, James Patterson, and Robert Chen. All very elderly, all with devoted family members managing their affairs. 3 people, all dead, all with devoted family members, just like the Dorothy Sullivan who had supposedly died there 2 weeks ago, while I was at home, alive, being legally erased by the same system. Are their families still in contact with you? Oh no. The families take care of all arrangements after death. We don't usually hear from them again once the affairs are settled. Affairs settled, estates processed, legal guardianship terminated when the protected person died. Thank you, I whispered. I hung up and called Ray back. Ray, I think you're right. This is bigger than just me. How much bigger? At least 4 people in the last month, all supposedly dying in care facilities, all with family members managing their affairs. Dorothy, listen to me very carefully. The people downstairs who want to take you to Willowbrook Gardens, do not go with them. But they have a court order. Court orders can be challenged. Dead people can't challenge anything. If you disappear into their system, you become another Dorothy Sullivan who dies peacefully while devoted family members settle your affairs. Through my bedroom window, I could see David and Nancy waiting by their car, checking their phones, probably calling for backup. I had perhaps 10 minutes before they came upstairs to collect me. Ray, what do I do? You run, Dorothy, right now. Pack light, move fast, and disappear before they can disappear you. But as I looked around my bedroom, at Robert's photos, at 30 years of memories, at the life I'd built in this house, I realized running would make me exactly what Melanie had toasted at her wedding. Disappeared. And maybe that's exactly what she was counting on. I didn't run. Instead, I walked downstairs and told David and Nancy that I needed to make one phone call before leaving my home. Of course, Mrs. Sullivan. Take your time. I dialed Melanie's number. She answered on the second ring. Mom, thank God. David called and said they found you. We've been so worried. Worried. The same daughter who had celebrated my disappearance 12 hours earlier. Melanie, I need you to explain something to me. I have legal documents here saying I've been declared incompetent and placed in a care facility, but I've been living in my own home. Mom, you're confused again. This is exactly why Dr. Hayes recommended residential care. You were evaluated 3 weeks ago, remember? You signed all the consent forms. I was never evaluated 3 weeks ago. A pause. Mom, I was there with you. You were having one of your episodes. You didn't recognize the office. You couldn't remember Dr. Hayes' name. You asked the same questions repeatedly. Episodes. Everything came back to these episodes I couldn't remember having. The facility says I died there 2 weeks ago. What facility? Mom, you're not making sense. You were never at any facility. That's why David and Nancy are there, to take you to Willowbrook Gardens for the first time. Relief flooded through me so powerfully I had to sit down. There had been a mistake. A terrible, systematic mistake, but just a mistake. So I'm not dead? Mom, of course you're not dead. What a horrible thing to worry about. The confusion is getting worse, isn't it? This is exactly why we need to get you proper care. Melanie's voice was gentle, patient, filled with genuine concern. The voice I remembered from childhood when I was sick, when I needed comfort. I'm sorry, I whispered. I've been so scared. I know, Mom. That's why I've been trying to protect you. The legal guardianship is just temporary until we can get your health stabilized. Dr. Hayes thinks with proper medication and routine, you might see significant improvement. Medication and routine, structure and safety. It sounded wonderful after the chaos of the past 24 hours. Can I stay in my own home? Oh, Mom, we tried that, remember? You were forgetting to eat, forgetting to take your medications, getting confused about time and place. That's why Dr. Hayes recommended supervised care. Had I been forgetting those things? The weeks since Robert's death were blurred, but I thought I'd been managing well enough. Willowbrook Gardens is beautiful, Melanie continued. I toured it myself. Private rooms, excellent nursing staff, activities programs. You'll love it there. And you'll visit? Every week, I promise. Mom, I love you. I just want you to be safe and happy. Love, safety, happiness. Everything I'd been missing since Robert died. Okay, I said. I'll go with David and Nancy. Good. Mom, I'm proud of you for making this decision. It takes courage to admit when we need help. After I hung up, I felt lighter than I had in months. The documents, the confusion, the terror, all products of my deteriorating mental state. Melanie was taking care of everything, just like she always had. David and Nancy helped me pack a suitcase, personal items, photos of Robert, some books I'd been meaning to read. Mrs. Sullivan, Nancy said as we prepared to leave, I want you to know that Willowbrook Gardens has an excellent track record. Most of our residents show significant improvement within the first few months. What kind of improvement? Reduced confusion, better sleep patterns, stabilized medication responses. Some residents even transition back to independent living after their cognitive function improves. Hope flickered in my chest. Maybe this wasn't the end of my independence. Maybe it was the beginning of getting better. The drive to Willowbrook Gardens took 45 minutes through countryside I'd never seen before. The facility itself was magnificent. Rolling lawns, flower gardens, a main building that looked more like a luxury hotel than a nursing home. It's beautiful, I said, and meant it. Wait until you see the inside, David smiled. The lobby was elegant. Marble floors, fresh flowers, classical music playing softly from hidden speakers. Residents sat in comfortable chairs, reading, playing chess, chatting with visitors. "Dorothy Sullivan," I told the receptionist. "I'm expected." She consulted her computer, frowning slightly. "I'm sorry. Can you spell that?" I spelled my name carefully. "I don't show anyone by that name scheduled for admission today." My stomach clenched. There must be some mistake. David stepped forward. "This is regarding the Guardian Services placement. We spoke with Administrator Williams this morning." "Oh," the receptionist brightened. "You're the emergency placement. Administrator Williams left specific instructions. Room 247, East Wing. Emergency placement, not Dorothy Sullivan." We rode the elevator to the second floor in silence. Room 247 was spacious and clean, with a hospital bed, a small seating area, and a window overlooking the gardens. "All your meals will be delivered," Nancy explained. "Medications are dispensed by nursing staff at scheduled times. Your daughter has arranged for you to see Dr. Martinez tomorrow for an initial evaluation." Dr. Martinez, not Dr. Hayes. "When can I expect visitors?" "Family members can visit during approved hours. Your daughter will need to coordinate with our security staff due to your previous wandering episode." Previous wandering episode, when I'd been living in my own home. What if I want to call someone? The nursing station can help you place calls during designated phone times. All outgoing calls are logged for safety purposes. Logged for safety purposes. As David and Nancy prepared to leave, a woman in scrubs appeared in the doorway. "Mrs. Sullivan, I'm Nurse Patricia. I'll be administering your evening medications." She handed me a small paper cup containing 3 pills I didn't recognize. "What are these for?" "Anxiety, sleep regulation, and cognitive support. Dr. Martinez's orders, based on your intake evaluation." "I haven't seen Dr. Martinez yet." "He reviewed your transfer documents and previous medical history. These will help with your transition anxiety." I stared at the pills. Medication prescribed by a doctor I hadn't met, based on documents from an evaluation I didn't remember. "What happens if I don't take them?" Nurse Patricia's smile became strained. "Mrs. Sullivan, medication compliance is important for your treatment plan. Your daughter specifically requested that we ensure you receive proper pharmaceutical support." My daughter had specifically requested pharmaceutical support. "Of course," I said, and swallowed all 3 pills. Within an hour, the edges of everything became soft. My thoughts felt wrapped in cotton. The confusion and fear I'd been carrying melted away, replaced by a pleasant floating sensation. This was better. Much better. Maybe Melanie had been right. Maybe I did need help. That night, I slept more peacefully than I had since Robert died. The next morning brought Dr. Martinez, a soft-spoken man with kind eyes and gentle hands. "How are you feeling today, Dorothy?" "Much better. The medication really helped." "I'm glad to hear that. Your daughter mentioned you've been having episodes of paranoia and confusion. Thinking people were trying to hurt you?" Paranoia. Was that what my fear had been? I thought there were legal documents that didn't make sense, that people were lying to me. Delusions about legal and financial matters are very common with cognitive decline. Your brain is trying to make sense of things it can no longer process clearly. That made sense. My brain trying to process things it couldn't understand, creating elaborate theories about conspiracies and systematic abuse. Am I getting worse? The good news is that with proper medication and routine, many patients see stabilization or even improvement. We'll monitor you closely and adjust your treatment as needed. Hope bloomed again. Stabilization. Improvement. Can I call my daughter? She's planning to visit this weekend. She's been very concerned about your welfare. Concerned about my welfare? The daughter who loved me enough to get me proper care when I couldn't care for myself. For 3 days, I felt genuinely happy. The medication kept the anxiety and confusion at bay. The nursing staff was attentive and kind. My room was comfortable, my meals were regular, and I felt safe. Then, on Thursday afternoon, I found something that shattered my peaceful bubble completely. I'd been looking for extra pillows in my bedside table when my fingers found an envelope wedged behind the drawer. Inside was a letter addressed to Eleanor Martinez. "My dearest Eleanor," it began, "I know you must be confused about your placement at Willowbrook Gardens, but please trust that your family loves you and wants what's best for you." The letter went on to explain Eleanor's episodes of confusion and her family's difficult decision to seek professional care. It was signed, "With love and concern, your devoted son Miguel." Eleanor Martinez, one of the 3 residents who had died at Sunset Manor last month, according to the staff member I'd spoken with. But this letter was addressed to Eleanor Martinez at Willowbrook Gardens, not Sunset Manor. With shaking hands, I searched the rest of the bedside table. I found 2 more letters. One addressed to James Patterson, one to Robert Chen. The same James Patterson and Robert Chen who had supposedly died at Sunset Manor. All 3 letters identical except for names. All 3 explaining placement decisions and family love and hopes for improvement. All 3 residents supposedly dead at one facility, but receiving mail at another. I sat on my bed, cotton-wrapped mind trying to process what I was holding. Eleanor Martinez, James Patterson, and Robert Chen hadn't died at Sunset Manor. They had been residents here at Willowbrook Gardens, in rooms just like mine, taking medication just like mine, receiving letters just like mine from family members who loved them and wanted what's best. And now they were dead. This is where Dorothy's story gets truly terrifying. The level of planning involved in systematic elder abuse. If you're realizing someone in your life might be vulnerable to this kind of exploitation, share this video with family members who need to see these warning signs. I stood up too quickly and immediately felt dizzy from the medication, but I had to know. Room 245, room 249, the rooms on either side of mine. I opened my door carefully. The hallway was empty except for a maintenance cart at the far end. Room 245's door was slightly ajar. Inside, I could see personal belongings scattered on surfaces. Photos, books, a knitted blanket. But the bed was empty. Room 249 was the same. Personal items suggesting recent habitation, but no resident. I walked to the nursing station on unsteady legs. "Excuse me, I was wondering about my neighbors in 245 and 249. Are they at activities?" The nurse looked up from her computer. "Those rooms are currently unoccupied. We had some transitions last week." Transitions? What happened to the residents? "I'm sorry, I can't discuss other patients. Privacy regulations, you understand." But her eyes flickered away from mine as she said it. Back in my room, I examined the letters again. All dated within the last 3 months. All explaining recent placement decisions. All for people who were now supposedly dead. I was in room 247, directly between the 2 empty rooms. Had Eleanor Martinez been in room 245? Had James Patterson been in 249? Had they found these same letters, addressed to other residents, hidden in their bedside tables? Had they realized, like I was realizing, that Willowbrook Gardens wasn't a care facility at all? My evening medication sat on the bedside table, waiting for me to take it. 3 pills. Anxiety, sleep regulation, and cognitive support. The same medication Eleanor Martinez had taken. The same medication James Patterson had taken. The same medication Robert Chen had taken, right up until their peaceful deaths. I walked to the window and looked out at the beautiful gardens, the rolling lawns, the setting sun painting everything golden. It was exactly as beautiful as Nancy had promised. A perfect place for elderly people to live comfortably while devoted family members managed their affairs, right up until the devoted family members no longer needed them to be alive. I picked up the 3 pills, walked to the bathroom, and flushed them down the toilet. If I was going to die in this beautiful place, I was going to die with my mind clear enough to understand exactly what was happening to me. And maybe, if I was very careful and very lucky, I could figure out how to make sure I wasn't the only one who knew the truth about Willowbrook Gardens before it was too late. That night, without the medication clouding my thoughts, I lay awake planning. If Eleanor Martinez, James Patterson, and Robert Chen had all been residents here before their supposed deaths at Sunset Manor, then Willowbrook Gardens wasn't what it appeared to be. And if I was right about what it actually was, I had very little time. The next morning, I pretended to take my medication, palming the pills and disposing of them in the bathroom. The nursing staff didn't notice, but I could feel my mind sharpening with each passing hour as the pharmaceutical fog lifted. By afternoon, I was thinking more clearly than I had in weeks. "Dorothy, you have a visitor," Nurse Patricia announced. My heart jumped. Melanie had said she'd visit this weekend, but it was only Friday. Instead of my daughter, a man in an expensive suit waited in the small conference room down the hall. "Mrs. Sullivan, I'm attorney William Bradley. I represent Guardian Services Incorporated." The court-appointed guardian I'd never met. "I understand you've been asking questions about other residents. Word traveled fast in this place. I found some letters that seemed confusing." "I'm sure you did. Mrs. Sullivan, I want to be direct with you. Your daughter is concerned about your mental state. She's asked me to evaluate whether your current care plan is adequate." "What does that mean?" "It means we need to discuss your cooperation with the treatment program, taking prescribed medications, following facility rules, avoiding disruptive behaviors like questioning staff about confidential patient information." Disruptive behaviors, like trying to understand what had happened to my neighbors. "And if I'm not cooperative?" Attorney Bradley's smile was professional and cold. "There are more restrictive care options available, facilities that specialize in residents who require additional supervision." Additional supervision. I thought about the empty rooms on either side of mine, about Eleanor Martinez and James Patterson and Robert Chen. "I understand," I said. "Good. I'm recommending you continue your current medication regimen. Dr. Martinez will be increasing the dosage to help with your recent agitation." Increasing the dosage to help with my inconvenient clarity. That evening, I received 3 pills instead of the usual dosage. Nurse Patricia watched carefully as I appeared to swallow all of them. "Feeling better?" she asked. "Much better," I lied. After she left, I waited until the hallway was quiet, then began what I told myself was just a walk to stretch my legs. The East Wing had 12 rooms. Half were occupied by elderly residents who seemed genuinely content with their care. The other half were empty, but showed signs of recent habitation. Room 251 had family photos still on the dresser. An elderly man with grandchildren, smiling at birthday parties and holiday gatherings. Room 253 contained knitting projects half finished in a basket by the window. Complex patterns that required steady hands and sharp minds. Room 255 had books stacked beside the bed. Advanced mathematics texts, philosophy, literature. Not the reading material of someone with severe cognitive decline. These weren't the rooms of people who had died naturally after long declines. These were the rooms of people who had been living full, engaged lives right up until their sudden deaths. I was examining the mathematics texts when I heard voices in the hallway. "The Martinez family was very satisfied with our services," someone was saying. "The transition was peaceful, and the estate settlement went smoothly." I pressed myself against the wall, listening. "What about the Patterson case?" another voice asked. "Even better." The son had been worried about a contested will, but with the guardianship documentation, everything was straightforward. 300,000 in assets transferred with no complications. 300,000 from James Patterson's estate after his peaceful death. And the Chen situation? The daughter was nervous about the family questioning the sudden placement, but once he was here for 2 months, everyone accepted that professional care was necessary. By the time of his passing, no one questioned the transition. Robert Chen. 2 months at Willowbrook Gardens before his death. 2 months for his family to accept that professional care had been necessary, just like they were accepting that professional care was necessary for me. The Sullivan case should be even smoother, the first voice continued. The daughter is an attorney. She's handled all the documentation herself. Very thorough, very professional. The Sullivan case, me. How long do you estimate? Dr. Martinez thinks 6 weeks for full medication compliance and behavioral adjustment. After that, the natural progression should take another 4 to 6 weeks. 6 weeks for medication compliance, another month or 2 for natural progression toward death. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from making any sound. The family seems convinced? The daughter's been documenting cognitive decline for months. Hospital records, incident reports, medical evaluations. If anyone questions the timeline, she has comprehensive evidence of gradual deterioration. Months of documentation. While I'd been grieving Robert, Melanie had been building a case for my systematic murder. What about her previous medical history? Any complications we should anticipate? Clean medical history, actually. Dr. Hayes had to be creative with the initial competency evaluation, but the daughter provided excellent collateral information about concerning incidents. Dr. Hayes had been creative about an evaluation I'd never attended, based on incidents that had never happened. The beauty of this system, the first voice continued, is that everyone wants to believe families are acting in their elderly relatives' best interests. No one questions loving children who seek professional care for declining parents. No one questions loving children, like Melanie, who had toasted my disappearance and then arranged for my systematic murder disguised as compassionate care. The voices moved away down the hallway, leaving me alone with the mathematics books and the horrible understanding of what Willowbrook Gardens actually was. It wasn't a care facility, it was a murder facility. Elderly people with significant assets were declared incompetent, placed under guardianship, moved here for care, medicated into compliance, and then allowed to die naturally while their devoted families managed their estates. Eleanor Martinez, James Patterson, Robert Chen, and soon, Dorothy Sullivan, all with loving families who had made difficult decisions about professional care, all with substantial assets that transferred smoothly upon their deaths, all with medical documentation showing gradual decline that made their deaths unsurprising. But I wasn't actually declining. I was being systematically murdered, slowly, legally, with my daughter's full knowledge and cooperation. The worst part wasn't the murder. The worst part was how believable the entire system was. Any investigation would find comprehensive medical records showing my cognitive decline. They'd find legal documentation of my family's careful decision-making. They'd find a beautiful facility with excellent staff providing compassionate end-of-life care. They'd find nothing suspicious at all about Dorothy Sullivan's peaceful death after months of loving professional care arranged by her devoted daughter. I made it back to my room without being seen, but my hands were shaking so badly I could barely open the door. On my bedside table was a small wrapped package with a note from Melanie. Dear Mom, I know this transition has been difficult. I brought you something that might help you feel more at home. I love you so much, and I'm so proud of how brave you're being about accepting the care you need. Love, Melanie. Inside the package was a framed photo of Robert and me on our wedding day, 34 years ago. We looked so young, so happy, so certain that we'd grow old together in the house we'd bought with such careful budgeting. Robert would never have believed that his beloved daughter was capable of systematic murder for inheritance money. But Robert had died suddenly of a heart attack 8 months ago, just after Melanie had started expressing concerns about my mental state. Robert, who had been in perfect health according to his last physical exam. Robert, who had been taking medication for blood pressure, medication that Melanie had been helping him manage since his diagnosis. Robert, whose sudden death had left me vulnerable and isolated and dependent on our daughter's legal expertise. Robert, whose death had started this entire nightmare. I stared at our wedding photo and felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Rage. Pure, cold, calculating rage. Melanie hadn't just murdered her parents for money. She'd spent months planning it, documenting it, creating legal justification for it. She'd toasted my disappearance at her wedding because she'd already arranged for it to be permanent. She'd convinced me to accept professional care because she needed me medicated and compliant while she waited for me to die quietly. She'd created a system so perfect that no one would ever question her devoted daughter act or investigate the facility that specialized in helping devoted daughters solve their inheritance timing problems. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd assumed I was actually the confused, declining woman she'd described in all her legal documents. She'd never considered the possibility that I might be something else entirely. 47 families thought their loved ones were being cared for. What's the hardest lesson you've had to learn about trusting the wrong people? Share your wisdom in the comments. Real recognize real, and your experience might save someone else from what these families went through. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Not Melanie, not Attorney Bradley, not Dr. Martinez. Ray Matthews, Robert's old business associate, the private investigator I'd called for help before David and Nancy had taken me to Willowbrook Gardens. "Dorothy," he said quietly as we sat in the conference room. "We need to talk. How did you find me? I've been looking for you for 3 days. Do you have any idea how hard it is to locate someone who's been legally erased from existence?" Legally erased from existence. That was exactly what had happened. "Ray, this place isn't what it appears to be." "I know. Dorothy, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "In your phone call asking for help, you demonstrated knowledge of investigative procedures that most people wouldn't possess. You asked questions about systematic documentation that suggest professional training and evidence gathering." My heart rate spiked. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that a confused widow grieving her husband's death doesn't typically know how to analyze legal documents for fraud indicators or identify patterns across multiple victims." I stared at him, understanding that we'd reached a critical moment. "Dorothy, I've been investigating guardianship fraud for 15 years, and in all that time, I've never encountered anyone who could infiltrate a systematic murder operation and gather the kind of evidence you've described unless they had very specific professional training." Professional training. So, I'm going to ask you directly. Who are you really? And what kind of federal law enforcement background are you pretending not to have? The room went completely silent. Ray Matthews, Robert's old business partner, had just asked me the one question I'd been hoping no one would think to ask. And I realized that after months of playing the part of a confused, vulnerable widow, I'd finally been caught by someone who recognized the performance for what it was. The question was whether I was ready to stop pretending to be helpless and start being who I actually was. Because 47 elderly people were dead, and Melanie's systematic murder operation was still running perfectly. And maybe it was time to show my devoted daughter exactly what kind of professional training her mother actually possessed. I looked at Ray Matthews across the conference room table and made a decision that would change everything. "You're right," I said quietly. "I'm not who I've been pretending to be." Ray nodded slowly. "What kind of background are we talking about?" "Financial investigation, 28 years of it." "Federal?" I hesitated, then nodded. "FBI Financial Crimes Division, retired last year." "Jesus, Dorothy. And Robert's death?" "Wasn't natural. Melanie had been managing his medications for months. I couldn't prove it then, but I can prove what's happening here." "What exactly is happening here?" I pulled out the letters I'd found in the bedside tables, plus documentation I'd been quietly gathering. Eleanor Martinez, James Patterson, Robert Chen, all residents here before their supposed deaths at other facilities, all with devoted family members managing their estates. Ray examined the letters carefully. How many do you think? Based on the empty rooms and financial patterns I've observed? At least 20, maybe more. This is sophisticated planning, Dorothy. Ray, when Melanie had me declared incompetent and placed here, she gave me something no outside investigator could get. Direct access to their operation. You've been gathering evidence while pretending to be their victim? Every medication they think I'm taking, every conversation they think I can't understand, every financial document they process while assuming I'm too confused to notice. Ray made notes. What do you need? I need you to contact someone for me. FBI Financial Crimes Division. Ask for Assistant Director Sarah Martinez. You still have contacts there? Just tell her that Dorothy Sullivan has documentation on a systematic guardianship fraud network. She'll know what that means. How will she know? I hesitated, then decided Ray needed to understand the stakes. Because I've been documenting this for months, Ray. This isn't just about saving myself anymore. After Ray left, I sat alone in the conference room, understanding that there was no going back. In 24 hours, I would either be extracted as a federal agent who'd successfully documented the largest elder fraud operation in Bureau history, or I would be another peaceful death at Willowbrook Gardens while my devoted daughter settled my estate. Either way, Dorothy Sullivan, the confused widow, was about to disappear forever. The question was whether Special Agent Dorothy Sullivan would emerge from this operation alive. That evening, I received an unexpected visit. Melanie arrived during dinner hours, looking polished and professional in her attorney attire. Hi, Mom. I wanted to check on how you're adjusting. She sat across from me in the conference room, the same room where I'd revealed my true identity to Ray 6 hours earlier. I'm feeling much better, I said truthfully. The medication is really helping with my confusion. I'm so glad to hear that. Dr. Martinez says you're making excellent progress. Progress toward death. Melanie, I wanted to apologize for being difficult about the placement. You were right. I do need professional care. Relief flickered across her face. Mom, you don't need to apologize. I know this has been hard for you. It has been. But I trust you to make the right decisions for me. I love you, Mom. Everything I'm doing is to protect you. Protect me by arranging my systematic murder. I know, sweetheart. You've always taken such good care of me. Melanie smiled, the genuine expression of a daughter who believed her mother was finally cooperating with her own execution. There is one thing I wanted to discuss with you. Attorney Bradley needs to complete some final paperwork for your guardianship. Just routine legal requirements. Final paperwork. The authorization for my death. Of course, whatever you think is best. He'll be here tomorrow morning. It's just a formality, but he needs your signature on a few documents. Documents authorizing increased medication protocols that would kill me within 2 weeks. I'll be ready. Melanie reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Mom, I'm so proud of how brave you're being about all this. Brave. If she only knew. Melanie, can I ask you something? Anything. Do you remember when I used to help you with your law school applications? All those essays about justice and protecting people who couldn't protect themselves? Her expression softened. I remember. You said I had a gift for standing up to bullies. I was so proud of you for choosing law, for wanting to help people. You were always my biggest supporter. I still am, I said. No matter what happens. After she left, I sat alone in the conference room thinking about the little girl who had wanted to be a lawyer so she could protect people from bullies. Somewhere along the way, that little girl had become the biggest bully of all. But tomorrow morning, when she signed the documents authorizing my murder, she would discover that some people are much harder to kill than others. and that sometimes the people you're trying to destroy have been preparing to destroy you right back. The FBI extraction was 18 hours away. Melanie's final paperwork was 10 hours away. One way or another, Dorothy Sullivan's long performance was almost over. Saturday morning brought Attorney Bradley and the documents that would authorize my death. I sat in the conference room at exactly 9 a.m., playing the part of the compliant patient one final time. "Good morning, Dorothy. How are you feeling today?" "Much clearer, thank you. The medication adjustment has really helped." Attorney Bradley smiled and opened his briefcase. "I'm glad to hear that. We have just a few routine documents to finalize your ongoing care plan." Routine documents. I watched him spread papers across the table, each page designed to legally justify my murder. "This first form authorizes Dr. Martinez to adjust your medication regimen as needed for optimal therapeutic outcomes." Optimal therapeutic outcomes. Death within 2 weeks. And this document gives Willowbrook Gardens permission to transfer you to specialized care if your condition requires more intensive treatment. Specialized care. A facility where no one would think to look for me. Finally, this updates your healthcare directive to ensure that all decisions prioritize your comfort and dignity during any medical transitions. Comfort and dignity during medical transitions. Palliative care to ease my systematic murder. Do you understand what you're signing, Dorothy? I understand that my daughter wants what's best for me. She does indeed. Melanie has been very thorough in planning for your long-term welfare. I picked up the pen with hands that only trembled slightly. After months of acting confused and frightened, it felt strange to sign documents while completely understanding their true purpose. As I finished the last signature, Attorney Bradley's phone buzzed. "Excuse me for just a moment," he said, stepping into the hallway. Through the partially open door, I could hear his side of the conversation. "Yes, all documents executed. No complications. Yes, she was completely cooperative. Dr. Martinez can begin the new protocol this afternoon." "I understand. No, there won't be any family visits until the transition is complete." No family visits until the transition was complete. Until I was dead and Melanie could grieve appropriately. Attorney Bradley returned with a satisfied expression. "Dorothy, I want you to know that your daughter is very proud of how well you're handling this transition. She knows it can't be easy. She's been wonderful through everything." "She has indeed. In fact, she asked me to tell you that she'll be visiting tomorrow to check on your progress." "Tomorrow, Sunday morning. I look forward to seeing her." After Attorney Bradley left, I sat alone in the conference room knowing that I'd just signed my own death warrant. But I also knew something Attorney Bradley didn't. At exactly 11:47 a.m., my phone would receive a text message that would change everything. The text arrived precisely on schedule, a single word: harvest. I walked calmly to the nursing station. "Excuse me, I think I'm supposed to receive a visitor this morning. Ray Matthews?" The nurse checked her computer. "I don't show any visitors scheduled for you today, Mrs. Sullivan." "Could you call the front desk? He said he'd be here at noon." As she picked up the phone, I heard the first sounds that indicated my 8 months of investigation were finally over. Car doors slamming in the parking lot. Multiple vehicles arriving simultaneously. Heavy footsteps in the main lobby. Authoritative voices asking for facility management. "Ma'am," the nurse said, looking confused, "there are some people here asking to speak with Administrator Williams immediately." Through the windows, I could see black SUVs surrounding the building. Men and women in FBI windbreakers positioning themselves at every exit. "Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen," a voice echoed through the facility's intercom system. "This is the Federal Bureau of Investigation. This facility is now under federal investigation. All staff and residents, please remain in your current locations." The nurse stared at me. "Mrs. Sullivan, what's happening?" "Justice," I said. Assistant Director Sarah Martinez appeared in the doorway of the nursing station, flanked by 2 agents. "Special Agent Sullivan," she said formally. Are you ready for extraction? Special Agent Sullivan. After 8 months of playing Dorothy the Confused Widow, hearing my real title felt like breathing again. I'm ready, Director Martinez. Do you have the documentation I prepared? Every medication sample, every conversation recording, every financial transaction. Your work here has been extraordinary. How many arrests? Simultaneously executed across 7 locations, 31 individuals in custody, including all primary network operators. 31 arrests, more than we'd initially projected. What about Melanie? Director Martinez's expression grew serious. Agent Thompson is executing that arrest warrant now. Dorothy, are you prepared for this? I thought about Robert, about Eleanor Martinez, James Patterson, Robert Chen, and all the other victims whose families had trusted the wrong people. I've been prepared for this moment for 8 months. Let's go then. As we walked through the facility, I could see FBI agents processing evidence in every room. Financial records, medical files, medication logs, resident personal effects. Everything that would build the federal case against the systematic murder network. In the main lobby, I saw familiar faces in handcuffs. Dr. Hayes, looking shocked and confused. The administrator Williams, already consulting with an attorney. Nurse Patricia, crying as agents read her rights. How comprehensive is the evidence? I asked Director Martinez. Your undercover work documented the most complete elder fraud operation in FBI history. We have financial records showing 57 victims over 4 years. Total assets stolen exceeding $12 million. 57 victims, $12 million. The scope was even larger than I'd estimated. What about the other facilities? Sunset Manor, Guardian Services, 3 associated legal firms, and 2 other residential facilities. The entire network is being dismantled simultaneously. And the victims' families? Notification teams are contacting all families today. Those with surviving victims are being reunited. Those who lost family members are being informed about the criminal nature of their deaths. We reached the parking lot where a convoy of federal vehicles waited. Through the windows of one SUV, I could see Attorney Bradley sitting in handcuffs, no longer looking satisfied with his morning's work. Dorothy? Director Martinez said as we approached her vehicle. There's something you need to know about Melanie's arrest. My stomach clenched. What happened? When Agent Thompson arrived at her law office this morning, she was already destroying documents, shredding client files, wiping computer hard drives, burning papers in her office fireplace. She knew? Someone in the network warned her, probably when our teams moved into position this morning. Did she resist arrest? She demanded to speak with you. Director Martinez opened the SUV door. In the back seat, behind a security partition, sat my daughter. Melanie looked at me through the bulletproof glass, her professional mask completely gone. Mom, she said, her voice muffled but audible through the intercom system. What have you done? I looked at the woman who had spent 8 months planning my systematic murder and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. I've done my job, Melanie. Just like I did for 28 years before you decided I was worth more dead than alive. Your job? Special Agent Dorothy Sullivan, FBI Financial Crimes Division. Your mother, the confused widow, was a performance. Your target was a federal agent. The expression on Melanie's face shifted from shock to recognition to something approaching respect. How long? Since the day Robert died. I knew his death wasn't natural. I just needed to understand the scope of what you were capable of. You let me try to kill you. I let you document your intent to kill me, along with 56 other people. The difference is important in federal court. Melanie leaned back against the seat, finally understanding the magnitude of what she'd walked into. The wedding toast, she said quietly, was the moment I knew for certain what kind of person you'd become. All of it? The confusion, the medications, the cooperation? All of it was evidence gathering. Every signature you made me forge, every document you falsified, every conversation you thought I was too medicated to understand. All recorded, all documented, all admissible in federal court. Melanie stared at me for a long moment. I underestimated you. You underestimated a lot of things. Like thinking the FBI wouldn't notice when 57 elderly people died under identical suspicious circumstances. Or thinking that systematic elder abuse wouldn't eventually attract federal attention. What happens now? Director Martinez leaned forward. Ms. Sullivan, you're being charged with wire fraud, elder abuse, conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering and murder in the first degree for the deaths of Robert Sullivan, Eleanor Martinez, James Patterson, Robert Chen, and 53 other victims. Murder in the first degree? Your father's death has been reclassified as homicide based on toxicology evidence your mother gathered. You're looking at the death penalty, Ms. Sullivan. The death penalty. For murdering her own father and 56 other people. Mom, Melanie said, her voice smaller now, you're really going to testify against me? I thought about all the families who would never see their elderly relatives again. All the people who had died believing their children loved them. All the victims who had trusted the wrong people. Melanie, you stopped being my daughter the moment you decided systematic murder was the acceptable way to finance your lifestyle. What you are now is a federal criminal, and yes, I'm going to testify against you. Even knowing it means I'll probably die in prison. Especially knowing that. Director Martinez closed the partition. Agent Sullivan, we need to get you to debriefing. As our convoy pulled away from Willowbrook Gardens, I looked back at the building that had been designed to systematically murder elderly people for their money. FBI agents were still processing evidence. Families were arriving to collect relatives who were still alive. Media vans were setting up in the parking lot to cover what would become the largest elder fraud prosecution in federal history. Dorothy, Director Martinez said as we drove toward FBI headquarters, your undercover work has potentially saved hundreds of lives. Guardianship fraud networks operate nationwide, and this case will become the model for dismantling them. What about the other victims? The ones who didn't survive? Their families will finally have justice, and their deaths will prevent hundreds of other families from experiencing the same loss. I closed my eyes and thought about Robert, about the wedding toast that had started this investigation, about 8 months of playing the confused widow while documenting systematic murder. Director Martinez? Yes, I want to lead the task force that dismantles the other networks. Dorothy, you've been through an extraordinary ordeal. You might want to consider... I want to lead the task force. There are other Melanies out there, other Willowbrook Gardens, other families being systematically destroyed. I want to stop all of them. Director Martinez smiled. Special Agent Sullivan, welcome back to active duty. Justice served. 57 families finally have answers. $12 million recovered. This is what happens when predators underestimate the wrong person. Hit that like button if you believe in consequences for people who prey on vulnerable families. 3 hours later, I sat in FBI headquarters watching live news coverage of the arrests. In a coordinated federal operation, 31 individuals have been arrested in connection with what the FBI is calling the largest elder fraud network in American history. The reporters stood outside Willowbrook Gardens as agents continued processing evidence. Among those arrested is prominent attorney Melanie Sullivan, accused of murdering her own father and systematically killing elderly residents for financial gain. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Special Agent Sullivan, this is Assistant Director Michael Chen, Portland Field Office. We have a guardianship fraud situation here that matches your network's pattern. 12 suspicious deaths in the past 6 months. Can you consult on the case? I stared at the message, understanding that Melanie's operation hadn't been unique. How many other networks were operating across the country? How many other families were losing elderly relatives to systematic murder disguised as compassionate care? I typed back, "I'll be on the next flight to Portland." Director Martinez appeared in the doorway. "Dorothy, you should know that we're receiving reports from field offices nationwide. Similar operations in at least 8 other states. 8 other states. Potentially hundreds more victims." "How many agents do we have working elder fraud?" "Including you? 12. 12 agents to investigate networks that had systematically murdered hundreds of elderly people across the country. We need a task force. We need you to testify against your daughter first. The trial starts in 6 weeks. 6 weeks to prepare testimony that would send my daughter to death row. But after that, there were other daughters, other facilities, other families who needed protection from the people they trusted most. The war against systematic elder abuse was just beginning, and Special Agent Dorothy Sullivan was ready to lead it. 6 months later, the federal courtroom was packed as Judge Harrison read the verdicts. I sat in the witness section, watching my daughter face the consequences of 57 murders. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree, we find the defendant Melanie Sullivan guilty. The word echoed in the marble chamber. Guilty. After 3 days of testimony, after 8 months of undercover investigation, after a lifetime of loving someone who had become a systematic killer. On the charge of elder abuse resulting in death of Robert Sullivan, guilty. My throat constricted. Robert's name in a courtroom, finally acknowledged as a murder victim instead of a heart attack statistic. On the charge of wire fraud exceeding $20 million, guilty. $20 million. The investigation had expanded beyond our initial estimates. 57 victims, their entire life savings stolen before their systematic murders. 37 guilty verdicts total. Melanie sat motionless as each one landed, her lawyer's composure finally cracking as the magnitude of her crimes was read into federal record. For the murders of 57 elderly Americans, the court sentences you to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Life without parole. At 34 years old, my daughter would die in federal prison. The gavel fell, and it was over. Outside the courthouse, media waited in the sweltering heat. "Special Agent Sullivan, how does it feel to have testified against your own daughter?" I looked directly into the camera, thinking about Eleanor Martinez, James Patterson, Robert Chen, and all the other victims whose families had trusted the wrong people. It feels like justice. 57 families finally have answers about why their elderly relatives died. That matters more than my personal relationship with the person who killed them. What's next for the Elder Justice Task Force? We've identified similar networks in 15 states now. This conviction establishes federal precedent for prosecuting systematic guardianship fraud as organized crime. The message is clear. If you prey on elderly Americans, the FBI will find you. Any advice for families worried about elderly relatives? I thought about all the warning signs I'd documented, all the red flags that loving families had missed because they trusted too much. Trust your instincts. If a family member suddenly develops confusion requiring immediate professional care, ask questions. Demand to see original medical evaluations, not summaries. Insist on second opinions from doctors you choose, not ones recommended by the family member seeking guardianship. And remember, real love protects people from harm. It doesn't rush them toward death for financial convenience. Final thoughts about your daughter? The little girl who had wanted to be a lawyer to protect people from bullies flickered in my memory, then faded. My daughter chose to become the biggest bully of all. But her victims finally have justice, and preventing future victims matters more than any family loyalty ever could. 2 years later, the Elder Justice Task Force had grown beyond anything I'd imagined when I first walked into that wedding reception and heard my daughter celebrate my disappearance. 87 agents across 23 field offices, 14 systematic murder networks dismantled, over 200 criminals arrested, $43 million recovered for victim families. But today wasn't about statistics. Today was personal. I stood at Robert's grave on what would have been our 37th wedding anniversary, carrying flowers and the final piece of business from the case that had started everything. The congressional hearing went well, I told him, placing roses on the headstone I'd had changed. It no longer read, "Beloved husband, devoted father." Now it said, "Robert Sullivan, murder victim whose death created justice for hundreds." They're making the task force permanent. Full federal funding, expanded jurisdiction, everything we need to protect families from people like Melanie. A warm breeze stirred the cemetery flowers. Somewhere in this peaceful place lay Eleanor Martinez, James Patterson, Robert Chen, and dozens of other victims who had died thinking their families loved them. I kept our promise about seeing the world, I continued, just took it in a different direction than we planned. Portland, Chicago, Miami, Phoenix, Atlanta, Denver. Cities where elderly people had died while their families celebrated early inheritances. Cities where federal agents now prevented those celebrations from happening. My phone buzzed. Director Martinez. "Dorothy, we have a situation developing in Seattle. Nursing home with 12 suspicious deaths in 6 months. Local authorities requesting elder justice consultation. What's the family dynamic?" Son is a financial planner. Very cooperative, very concerned about his mother's declining condition. Sound familiar? Another financial professional. Another concerned adult child. Another systematic murder operation disguised as compassionate family care. I'll handle it personally. "Dorothy?" Director Martinez paused. "The son's name is Michael Chen, Robert Chen's nephew." My blood went cold. Robert Chen, one of the original Willowbrook Gardens victims. His nephew was now running a similar operation in Seattle. The pattern is spreading through families, I realized. They're teaching each other how to do this. Which is why we need you there tomorrow. That evening I sat in my apartment, no longer the house I'd shared with Robert, which held too many memories of the daughter who had tried to kill me there, and reflected on how completely my life had changed. 3 years ago, I'd been Dorothy Sullivan, the grieving widow, confused by legal documents and dependent on my daughter's help. Now I was Special Agent Dorothy Sullivan, leading the federal government's fight against systematic elder abuse. The confused widow performance had become the most successful undercover operation in FBI financial crimes history. But the cost had been everything I'd once considered my family. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. I opened it to find a young woman holding an envelope. "Agent Sullivan? I'm Correctional Officer Patricia Wade from FCI Alderson. I have something for you." The letter was from Melanie. 3 years into her life sentence. "Mom, I finally understand what you meant about protecting people from bullies. I've started teaching legal literacy classes to elderly inmates who were victimized by their families. It doesn't change what I did, but maybe it prevents what others might do. I know you'll never forgive me, but I wanted you to know that somewhere underneath the criminal I became, your daughter still exists. She's trying to make amends the only way she can. Love always, Melanie." I read the letter twice, then walked to my desk and opened the case file marked Sullivan Melanie, Systematic Elder Abuse Network. Inside were 8 months of undercover reports, medication logs, conversation transcripts, financial records, evidence that had sent 31 people to federal prison and saved potentially hundreds of lives. I filed Melanie's letter in the back of the folder, then closed it for the final time. Some stories end with forgiveness. Others end with consequences. The best ones end with both, and with the understanding that justice matters more than family loyalty to those who would harm innocent people. But all of them end with this truth: your inner wisdom, your willingness to ask difficult questions, and your courage to protect vulnerable people matter more than maintaining comfortable lies about the people you love. What's the most important thing you've learned about protecting elderly family members from systematic exploitation? Share your knowledge below. Together, we can prevent what happened to those 57 families. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about people who refuse to be victims. Your voice matters in this community. Tomorrow, I would fly to Seattle to investigate another family that had learned to profit from elderly death. But tonight, I looked out my window at the city lights and thought about all the elderly people sleeping peacefully because federal agents were watching for the predators who might target them. Your voice matters. Your questions matter. Your instincts about family members who seem too helpful with legal and financial decisions matter. Trust them. Act on them. Protect the people who can't protect themselves. Because somewhere out there, in nursing homes and care facilities across America, there are elderly people whose families love them enough to want them dead. And the only thing standing between those people and systematic murder is your willingness to notice when something doesn't feel right about the people asking you to trust them. Thanks for listening. Your inner wisdom saved 57 lives you'll never meet. Use it to save the ones you will.